But this is really a space where we want everyone to relax, breathe, get to know each other, build community, build, understanding amongst the different beliefs and cultures and, groups of people and different people, etc. And we hope you enjoy them and you come back to these sessions. They get enriched and they are here because they're about people. They're about us talking to each other and having meaningful conversations. So that is what is important. So we will start with a prayer by Tinashe will say a prayer and then I'll introduce our speaker.
O thou compassionate Lord, thou who art generous and able, we are servants of thine sheltered beneath thy providence. Cast thy glance of favor upon us. Give light to our eyes, hearing to our ears, and understanding and love to our hearts. Render our souls joyous and happy through thy glad tidings. O Lord, point out to us the pathway of thy kingdom and resuscitate all of us through the breaths of the Holy Spirit. Bestow upon us life everlasting and confer upon us never-ending honor. Unify mankind and illumine the world of humanity. May we all follow thy pathway, long for thy good pleasure, and seek the mysteries of thy kingdom. O God, unite us and connect our hearts with thine indissoluble bond. Verily, thou art the giver, thou art the kind one, and thou art the Almighty.
Thank you, Tinashe. So tonight, Golara Khayltash, which everyone calls her Goli, we'll be speaking about re-examining the concept of justice in the global age. Goli is a telecoms engineer and has been working for many years now as a telecoms engineer in different large companies. She's always very curious, always loving to learn new things, and always amazed by accomplishments of and human ingenuity and all the developments and accomplishments of the human race. She will be talking about how Bahá'í ethics can guide us through contemporary challenges, offering insights into navigating today's complex world with a spiritual perspective. Over to you, Guli.
Thank you very much. Very, very warm welcome to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And a disclaimer. So as John mentioned, I'm an engineer and I'm very much a layperson when it comes to the topic of justice. I find it a very interesting topic and it's really, really deep. So I'm going to present a lot of the Baha'i thoughts and principles on justice and examine them a little bit. But I know there's a wealth of information and insight here. So it would be nice to make this very collaborative. So please join in and contribute. It will be far richer with everyone's contribution. So the topic is examining the concept of justice in a global age, but I'm also going to look at some things that are not very new, but challenges that have always been with us. So first, I'll look at the definition of justice, then further explore it from a Baha'i perspective, like how to apply it, and look at the implications, both individually and also in the wider society. So there are many definitions of justice, and one that I liked was the concept that individuals are to be treated in a manner that is equitable and fair. Is everybody happy with this? Seems to encompass the heart of it. But when I think about the concept of justice, it seems that it's something external. So it's embodied in laws and courts and systems of government. And because it's external, oftentimes the motivation to act in a just way is driven by the fear of consequence, be it punishment or or judgment. And it's essential to have a system of governance and justice enshrined in laws, but I don't think that's entirely enough. So, for example, the laws of a country, well, can anyone think of examples of how justice is not always served by the laws of a country?
Well, for example, there's an unequal society, which I think this country's got history of as well, compared to other countries, so also not always just. Yeah.
Or maybe as well, for example, in a country like Afghanistan,
Yeah.
which the women are not able to go to school anymore, they're not able to work as doctors, nurses, teachers, so they're all relegated, and it's low. Yeah. So it could be the rule, it's not always fair.
Absolutely. And we have a range in different countries. So some countries tend to have laws that are more fair and more comprehensive, and on the other side, less fair and less comprehensive with more loopholes. So laws and legislation, it's not always either complete or just. And also society is just evolving at such a fast pace that legislation is often left far behind. So there are wide gaps that are often being taken care of. And as we move towards a more global society with different laws being enforced in different places, for example, if you look at business, it's possible to bypass the laws of one country simply by moving to another one. So maybe moving your factory somewhere else that doesn't have stringent controls on minimum pay, workers' rights, different tax laws, things like that. So I think what we need is a framework or a set of principles that we can apply on a wider scale, and that's what we're going to look at. So, examining the Bahá'í concept of justice, one of the most striking aspects of justice in the Bahá'í teachings is the emphasis on personal responsibility. So, it takes it from being something external to us that is imposed upon us to something that's inherent in us. So, it's not just a legal or punitive concept, but, and I find this really beautiful, it sees justice as a capacity of the human soul. So it looks at justice as something, it's got a spiritual nature to it, moving beyond legal or societal implications. And if it's a capacity of the human soul, then it's implied that this inherent capacity is within each person, and we also are able to exercise it like a muscle and make it stronger, so further attune our sense of justice. There's a great emphasis in the Baha'i writings on justice. Baha'u'llah says, "The best beloved of all things in my sight is justice." And elsewhere, he's written, "The essence of all that we have revealed for thee is justice." And when we examine the Baha'i principles, we see that how at the root of them, they're underpinned by the concept of justice, and we'll examine a few examples later on. So in this view, we have a personal responsibility for justice. We're meant to take ownership of justice in our personal lives. And so it would require each of us to act with, and there are quite a few related concepts as well, with truthfulness, with fairness, integrity, and impartiality in our daily lives. And it's quite difficult because we might be inclined maybe towards favoritism. We're not always 100% impartial. Self-interest is another very big thing, bias. And so we need to try to not balance, more suppress these or override these. And there are many different examples of how we need to do this. So maybe we might need to mediate a discussion or an argument between people we know. So on a relatively simple scale, maybe there are two children and there's a bit of an issue and we need to try to help them resolve it. Or to very complex things, for example, situations at work that have to do with serious ethics. So how do we act in a just manner? What do the Baha'i writings say about how we can be just? Baha'u'llah offers profound guidance on this. He says, by the aid of justice, thou shalt see with thine own eyes and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. And I think there are so many implications in this passage, and personally, I see it as a compass or a guiding light that helps us align our lives towards truth. So it reminds us that justice begins with independent investigation of truth, which is another key Baha'i principle. So we don't simply inherit the views and the beliefs of people around us, be it our forefathers, our customs and tradition, or what society is around us, but we must critically look at these things and try to discover the truth. And I see this process as safeguarding us from inherited prejudices and intolerance, of which I think there are quite a few in various societies and cultures, and ensures that we're not blindly following the dictates of tradition or social norms. And also, especially when it comes to tradition and customs, it protects us from values that are no longer relevant and are outdated. And I see this as giving us a certain kind of freedom. So me as an individual, not only am I free to, but I'm encouraged to decide what my beliefs are independent of what has been handed down to me, of what I've inherited, see what my beliefs are based on truth and critical thinking. And I think that's quite empowering. And another aspect of this, which becomes more and more relevant as time goes by, especially now when misinformation is spreading so easily, is to really examine what we hear around us, to see especially things that we share with others, things that we might act on, to see where does this come from? And it's not practical to look at every single thing. So obviously there would be some authorities which we trust and we would believe in them, but oftentimes, especially in news and social media and things like that, instead of just being controlled, I get this analogy of like a wind being blown from side to side by all of these different winds, by a leaf. It's more when we critically look at the information that's around us, we take autonomy, we take control of our own lives, and again, it's that compass that sets us on the path of truth. Yeah, I definitely think it turns us into people with agency. Baha'u'llah further writes, be fair to yourselves and to others, that the evidences of justice may be revealed through your deeds. And I think this exhortation provides a profound insight into the dual nature of justice, that it operates both within us and in our relationships with others. And often we equate justice to how we treat others, but Baha'u'llah expands this notion to how we treat ourselves. So what would be some examples of how we can be fair to ourselves?
That's very question.
It got me thinking. And how would we do that? I think 100% yes.
Because it's challenging, it's a big question. It's quite.
Because often we turn this towards others and not towards ourselves.
Golly. It's easy to follow custom, and if somebody's been treated badly, it's custom. But if we're going to be fair to ourselves, we have to look into ourselves and say, shall I follow that because that's the custom? Because it's not fair. So that's the only way I could think that you're suggesting we have to be true to ourselves. Because we accept a lot of things in this life. And as we go along, we're just protecting ourselves. We're not so worried about other people. But we have to be honest with ourselves as to when somebody, maybe we have an opportunity to step up in a constructive way when we see that something's happening that's not very fair. And always it should be done with kindness. It shouldn't be arguments or anything like that. But we don't want to bother with that because we're all too concerned with our lives.
Absolutely. Thank you, Auntie Florence.
And I think maybe as well, it's about reflection. And so to take a moment to think about, how we reacted, how our actions, what were our actions, why was there a trigger, what triggered us. There's all sorts of questions, I think, within kind of a self-reflection type of scenario where you could arrive to that point where we're being honest with ourselves, right? To kind of take away those veils, that we always put, and we always try to make things nice and polished and all that. So
Thank you very much.
I think if, for example, these 2 points, we are honest to ourselves, like to reflect. That's what I think we could do, what I have done today, what kind of a situation I've encountered myself. Did I act correct or not? We need to do that. Nobody will do that for us. We have to do that. So imagine if each one of us would have done something like that along the history of humanity, many of the catastrophes wouldn't have happened. Because what is the tendency of humanity? Following.
So you're good at that.
Yeah, I think that if the majority of people are doing that, maybe it's correct. This is now, I guess, all that we have to, that's what Baha'u'llah says, that you see with your own eyes and decide with your own, on your own merit. That is what we need to do. So because following is very easy, how much wars we went through, how much catastrophe nowadays is happening. Yeah? Because people are thinking of following. But if we have to be honest with each other, we wouldn't do that. So self-reflection is one of the very important.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so I see in this context, it means treating ourselves with the same honesty as well as respect and compassion that we are expected to tend to others, to extend to others. This concept of self-reflection, I think, is quite critical. Again, in terms of the broader picture of justice, and also as a way of ourselves to grow and develop. And another aspect of being just to ourselves might be to try to ensure that our work and our deeds are aligned to what we see as our true purpose and also our inherent dignity, which also requires a lot of reflection. So I think a lot of these concepts, they're amazing, they're profound, but maybe not necessarily easy. Yes, Aris.
Well, this comes with maturity. I've tried to say this to a youngster. You love it. You will argue until it becomes, it comes with maturity and going through life, through hardship. Without that sensitivity doesn't come.
Can I be the youngster? That's true. But as well, it is also equally true that the older you get, you have a tendency to not want to unlearn certain things because we are so grounded in the ways that we are. Whereas with for example, myself, or let's say even my daughter, she still has a fresh mind, she's learning. So it's actually easier for her to unlearn certain things. Like I can easily, with one level of discipline, like something can be undone and redone. Whereas for myself, I have to go through multiple mistakes to actually remind myself. So I think it actually depends on your life situations. Some people go through the most tough situations that teach them the most valuable of lessons when they're very young. And some people only get to learn when they're old. So I think it's actually quite variant in terms of the way people actually embrace those certain values.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. I like that. So I think there might be hope for us all.
I mean, the concept of being, when they talk about learning mindset, to have a learning mindset, and I think that doesn't depend on age, doesn't depend, and I think it is actually, it depends on the level of maturity where you see that life carries on and there's always something new to learn. So, and I think that's being mature, to have that mindset of learning, because we know that life changes, people change, situations change, perspectives, different perspectives are there. So to embrace that, one has to be quite grounded and matured, I think, and that kind of speaks, I think, to what you were talking about, that kind of level of, maybe it's wisdom, I don't know what it is, it's experience, it's knowing people, understanding people. Yeah.
So the willingness, and also humility. And there's no humility, then there's no way you learn. And you study, you're closing the door.
Yeah.
You say, I know better. And then next thing you go.
What I need to say, the first thing you learn, see with the eye of
Your own eyes.
it is very important because when you ask, do you want to be like that? Do you accept this happens to you? You see, you put yourself in the shoes of others. Do you? And when you see you come to justice, no. So why do you accept it for other people? You see, it is very important that little things explain a lot. Do you want this even from to the children? You have it, and the child does something, and you talk like that. Do you let this happen to you? Is it better if they do it to you? This is what's help, not with the eye of others.
Thank you. There was a lovely quote that I found that I wanted to end the talk with, but you've gone right to it. So Baha'u'llah says, "And if thine eyes be turned towards justice, choose thou for thy neighbor that which thou choosest for thyself." So yes, I think we'll come to it one more time, but I think that's at the heart of what you're saying. You put yourself in somebody else's position and see, would you still choose the same thing for them?
I think that also touches on being honest with yourself.
There you go.
What is your motive
There you go.
for deciding something? Are you being kind to somebody because it makes you feel good? Are you being kind to somebody and helping them when in fact they should be taking responsibility? It gets very complicated if you really go into that.
Because a lot of harm can happen with very, very good intentions
Yes.
and not thinking things through properly.
I think, it shows as well. If you see the way, as an example, the way, non-governmental organizations work or development funding works, how its basis is good intentions. We want to help, right? And, but a lot of times it engenders more damage and more divisions, actually, because typically international NGOs, as an example, they will have expats, so just that kind of simple, the human factor, right? So if you're from another country and you come and work here in South Africa, you will be paid much more than the local. So you already for the same job, right? So already there is the sense of fairness is kind of put in question, right? So a lot of questions arise around these systems that we've set within a very great, group of organizations. They're doing wonderful work, but already the basis of the human factor is kind of set on the division, on difference, not treating people equally or equitably. So that's an example.
Yeah, you see, you have touched upon the fact that justice alone cannot be implemented. It can be implemented together with other spiritual principles, such as understanding that the basic truth that humanity is one. We are all one and the same. No matter where we are born, what color we are the same. So justice and unity have to go hand in hand. You cannot implement justice in a way in one part of the world and then in another way in another part of the world. Understanding that men and women are equal. Everybody has to have a right for education. This in itself will allow the implementation of justice.
Thank you.
Actually, I could say the Universal House of Justice, that international body, has sent a rather lengthy article to the United Nations, which is meeting on plans for the future. That's the name, the coming together of United Nations to plans for the future. And in these pages, it's explained the fact that if there's going to be a plan for actual, literal peace on Earth, then the concept has to be changed so that everybody all over the world realize that we are one mankind, we are one, that every time something happens in one country, it affects the other. Don't just keep it there. And the emphasis is mankind is one. And they've sent, Betty gave me a copy, she printed it out from her email. And this has been sent to the United Nations.
Thank you very much. So that was the next 3 sections of the talk.
Yeah, sorry. I just really wanted to honestly go deeper, not deeper, but to emphasize on equitability.
Okay.
Say equitable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's a concept that I think is great to highlight because you cannot treat people equally. You can treat people in an equitable way. In the sense that there is a lot of context that comes with where we are in the world today. And I see this is the main issue that people are grasping with when it comes to justice is, but why would more go to this person now than me? We should have the same. But they are not realizing that, or we are not realizing that we all start off from different pedestals, for example. So it is actually more important to be more equitable than to be equal. Because if you give me 2 and I have 10, and you give someone 2 who's starting from 0, we are still unequal at the end of the day. So I think that is easy to say, but the concept is very difficult to grasp, especially in this context and this particular continent. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This is great. Everyone's doing the talk. Yes. So the next half of that statement of Baha'u'llah, be fair to others, was exactly what you said. So we're called to uphold justice in our dealings with everyone we encounter, but fairness isn't necessarily about treating everyone the same. I'm just going to reiterate what you said. But about ensuring that we give each person what they deserve be it respect or kindness or material resources. And again, this is exactly what you said. It's recognizing the unique circumstances that each person has and acting appropriately and with empathy and with integrity. Thank you. Yeah, 100%. So just to finish off that, the being just to ourselves and being just to others. So Baha'u'llah's guidance suggests that justice is a holistic process that begins within and radiates outwards. So if we cultivate fairness and integrity in our own lives towards ourselves, then we're more capable of acting justly in our relationships to others. And it maintains a certain unity of how we are as well. Then looking at ways that we must be fair to other people brings to mind other Baha'i principles that are rooted in justice. And you went into this, which one of the most important ones, and I think it's the foundational belief of the Baha'i faith, is the essential oneness of humanity, which calls upon total elimination of all forms of prejudice. And I don't think we really need to go much into depth here because it's obvious that when we're prejudiced towards a certain group, be it prejudice for the better or for the worse, we don't judge them on their own merits and their own actions. We reach some conclusions based on facts, general facts, and yeah, so it's those conclusions that we act on instead of the actual truth of the situation and what the person is. So that fundamentally undermines justice. And another issue, which I think you touched on, is gender equality. So the way I see all of these principles is that there's like a foundation of justice, and these are like different examples or different representations of it. So the oneness of all humanity is we're all created in the image of God, by God, and the intrinsic value of each person is the same. Therefore, when you treat everyone with justice, you treat everybody as being equal. So it's racially, culturally, classes in society, levels of education, everything. Another one, which is quite a big topic, is gender equality, which is just another facet of this essential oneness of humankind. And this concept is acknowledged by most of the world and it's enshrined in law, except I think that it deserves looking at in a bit more detail. So one thing that struck me recently, this is a bit of an example. Many countries in the West are experiencing serious population decline or declining population growth. And a reason is that women feel they need to choose between having a career or having the more traditional role of being a mother. But then why does this need to be a choice? Because a declining population is seen as a national issue, but children are usually seen as the responsibilities of mothers. So it's not looking at it in the same way. So if it's an issue of national importance, then surely bringing children up should also be something that is collaborative, that everyone should be involved in. So I don't know if you'd like to go through this thought experiment with me.
Subject of it, so.
But what might some changes be that could enable mothers to have a career? And I mean, we've got great examples of mothers who have a career, who've raised daughters, who are also mothers who have careers. So how can we look at this differently?
Can change the way we look at what is valuable. For example, one would say, oh, I'm staying at home or I'm working, but staying at home and being a mom is a valuable job because it does help to nurture the future of the country. So the emotional, intellectual, or spiritual capacity of the country, which in often cases ends up costing money. Because for example, if people want to look at money alone and say, it's about the capital of our country, then surely we should look at the human values to be equal to the capital value of the country. So if we were to look at how children are nurtured, and it all goes back to the same thing, it all boils down to one part, and I think we can maybe change the way in which we value certain aspects in countries. If there's a cultural aspect that is equally as valuable as the capital in the country, or as the minerals that the country is using to run their economy. In as much as that's easy to say, I know that it's difficult to actually put into practice, but I think it's mainly about changing the perspective of what is valuable. Maybe we need to decenter the way we think about value, that it's not just about money. Yeah.
Or maybe have a way of financially rewarding mothers who are raising the next generation of the country. I really like what you say about the value attached to it.
The saying that sense that amount of the energy that the mother is at the home can tell on the night of New York City for one day.
That's just too much.
What Rutendo said, you compared value to resources such as minerals, such as, all other things. But the best resource that any community can have is human resource. And the human resources are the ones that mothers are raising. And that is the most noble of jobs, according to the Bahá'í faith. So if that kind of thinking is internalized by the society, then the companies will look at motherhood in a different light. It's not a burden; it's just a privilege to to have somebody who's raising the future resources of the community.
Yeah, I think there are also some examples that we see in some of the Nordic countries where both men, the father and the mother, are supported by the companies, the workplace, to be parents. Full parents. So I think that's a wonderful and creative way of looking at things, and to make us think about that it's possible to do this. It just requires the will and the understanding that it's possible. It's happening. It might not be perfect, but at least it's a step forward. And maybe it's more manageable there because they've got less populations. I don't know. Maybe there are different factors that kind of helps it.
You've got a homogeneous population, so it's easy to communicate and set values and address the mindset. But what countries actually need to do is change their focus and say, what is our most, as you pointed out, what is the most valuable asset, which is the children. So everything should be addressed to focus on the upbringing of the children. The whole way of work and tax and spending and so on should be focused on that.
It's very interesting, this topic. Today morning, they had breakfast with some ladies. My mother is 86 years old, and she has started to think and is very passionate about this idea that women should be compensated for all the work that they do.
Yes.
She has told her that, we need to make the government understand the woman washes the house, raises the child, washes the dishes, nurtures, then goes to farms, all of those kind of. So she has to have some sort of a compensation that to empower women. This 86-year-old woman that today she was working for. But and I think this, if it happens, this could be wonderful. Yes. But what my feeling is that this concept of justice, we shouldn't go very further. We should look into our own lives to put it into practice. So imagine if each one of us put that concept of justice in our own home, household. This is one. And how do we put this justice between my children? How to make sure that my daughter is empowered. Yeah, that does not think that she's less than a son. You know, how to get them to have a proper education. Yeah, because these are all, as you say, mothers of tomorrow. You know, it's when it becomes a wonderful, educated woman, she's going to have a lot of role to play for the education of her children, the next generation. So these are the things that I think it can be applicable at a very grassroots level and all of our whole household. And then start working on them. You know, from in out, and then not to think about government should do this, government should. No, what can I do as a component of this society?
You see, one of the teaching of Baha'u'llah is compulsory education. You cannot deprive. These two things in Baha'i faith. It is a big sin. You deprive your children from education. Is one of them. And something to your surprise, when you get money, even you have money to educate your son or your daughter, goes to your daughter. Your daughter is in priority to get educated because she is going to be the educator of the future children and generations. It is not impossible. You can, because the educator, the first educator is mother. You want to teach justice, you want to teach, I don't know, whatever you want to do. That's mother doing it.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Austin.
Please.
Maybe we can also abandon an individualistic mindset. For example, it's if you look back in the day or back here, the way children are raised is not only by their parents, but it actually literally does take a village. And so I think literally it affects even the way people live. Like back in not so ancient, but back in the villages when if you look architecturally at the way African villages were constructed was actually in such a way that everyone had access to each other as a family and not isolated, but it was to actually enable for the family unit to be brought up even by the extended family. So that those are some of the things that we may have forgotten, or we may try to look at new solutions, but we might actually have old solutions that we could apply to today.
That's lovely. So we don't need to come up with everything new. A lot of the wisdom we already had and we might have forgotten.
It's also, I mean, when you look with your own eyes, so you look at things and you can critically kind of see what they do, then we've not, you know, taken in by the trends and by, you know, this kind of, you know, movement of, but we see kind of the value in, you know, some of cultural practices that we've had. And I think the question then comes in how empowered we are to share these with others, because I think that's very important. I think there's so much that as South Africans, as, you know, Africans, we can provide to the world in terms of learning, in terms of science, in terms of, there's so much, you know, there's so much knowledge that's here. And because we've always been seen as the developing, the third world, and all, I mean, those are really realities, and it's just been so ingrained over centuries that we, you know, this kind of seeing with our own eyes, and, you know, is kind of empowering us to do things differently and to actually talk truth, you know, about the realities that.
And to be fair to ourselves, and our continent.
I mean, that's a big one, hey? When you think about it, to be fair to ourselves, as, you know, if we think about South Africans who've lived through apartheid. How does that mean, to be fair to myself? People who have gone through, who have been downtrodden, who haven't had opportunities, and that's all around the world as well. I mean, we can see that. So to be fair to ourselves is a big one. Yeah, that's a big one.
And I feel that just they want women to become more into right spaces.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't like because they've noticed that I think in the olden days women they were not, just without a allowed the space, right spaces, women are actually
So we have just touched on a few of the different examples of justice. The topic of the talk was justice in a global age. So I'd like to move over just very briefly to look at the Baha'i vision for global governance. So it emphasizes justice, which is no big surprise, as the foundational principle for guiding international relations and the management of global resources. And I think these are issues that are going to become more and more relevant. For example, different people, different countries are going to the moon and mining there. So who owns what and who should get what? Just one example. And the Baha'i framework advocates for a system that transcends individual national interests. And this is the key part that recognizes that the well-being of humanity as a whole depends on fairness and equity. So I think this will be quite a considerable lesson for the different nations to learn. And although it is difficult, but I think it's inevitable because we still look at ourselves in the world as cities, not as city-states, as different nations, being mainly responsible first to the nation and then maybe to the wider humanity. But a lot of issues are arising that need to have a global solution. So, I mean, just three topics that came to my mind, like the topic of migrants. You have some people living in one part of the world, either experiencing injustice or very poor living conditions, or maybe damage caused by climate change, which is another issue. So they don't just remain the issue of their problem, they become an international issue. Damage caused by climate change is definitely going to escalate, and epidemics as well. So if something else happens, like the coronavirus, we can see that it needs a global united vision of looking at it. And we're very slowly moving towards a coherent global approach. And we can see the first few attempts that are being made. So like the United Nations, for instance, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at the conference at the United Nations, Afghanistan has been called upon and they're given 6 months to sort out their issues. Otherwise, more sanctions or some other consequences are going to be enforced upon them for the way they treat their women because it's against fundamental human rights. So these are the first images, first glimpses that we see of this, but a lot more is needed. And the Baha'i writings propose a framework of how we can approach and address these issues in a twofold way, both, as Auntie Roya was saying, personally in our own lives, and guidance on how we as a global society can uphold justice universally. So that brings us to the end, and I'd like to finish off with the quote again, which I see as kind of like a touchstone to show us how justice can be received or achieved. Baha'u'llah says, "And if thine eyes be turned towards justice, choose thou for thy neighbor that which thou choosest for thyself." So thank you very much, and thank you for all of the